So meditation is a practice, and the teachings that coincide with meditation are a practice that can really provide you with a different way of being in your life. They can really provide you with a different experience of who you are. They can provide you with a different way of perceiving what's happening. They can provide you with a different understanding of reality. And this is the real purpose of meditation in the most practical sense. And because I'm a psychologist, the appeal of meditation for me was a no-brainer. Because in working with people who are suffering from anxiety and depression and difficulties in their relationships and addiction, that for many years I felt very frustrated by the fact that my training as a psychologist and all the different theoretical models that I had been trained in did not seem to have much success in relieving the suffering of people, did not seem to have much success in helping people to be different in the way that they behaved. And having worked in the prison system for 32 years, that frustration was compounded by the fact that the people that I was working with had done some pretty destructive things and were in a pretty difficult situation. And so it really was disheartening for me to feel that somehow I wasn't really able to get my job done. And in the beginning, I believed that what I was taught, the theoretical models that I was taught and the training that I had to do psychotherapy was valid, and I just wasn't very good at it. But as time passed and years passed and I continued to study these things and I continued to study other things outside of the conventional practice of psychology, I began to learn that there was another possibility. And it started to occur to me that in conventional psychology, there are there is a number of different theoretical models that explain the personality and explain human behavior. That in itself is a problem because people don't realize it, but when you go to see a psychologist or a therapist, that therapist or psychologist has usually been trained in a specific model of understanding human behavior and has usually been trained in a specific approach to doing psychotherapy. And that model and that approach can be very different from other models and approaches. And most people don't know about this to know enough to ask about that or get any education about the orientation of the therapist to find out how this person works. And this is different from the medical model. This is different from physiology. Mental health is different from physiology. In physiology, you know, doctors are trained to do surgery, doctors are trained to perform procedures, and the procedures are the same across the line. It's not like, you know, to remove someone's appendix, there's 25 different theories about how to do that and 25 different procedures to follow. It doesn't work like that, and it doesn't work like that in most other places in the mechanical world. If you go to look up how to fix a particular problem in your car's engine, you're not going to find 25 different approaches to do it. It's pretty much understood. There are things that work, and we do those things. Unfortunately, in psychology and psychiatry, that has not become the case because human behavior and the mind and the psyche are not physical, they're not material, right? And the brain is much more complicated than a car engine. And so we have this situation, and when I was being trained, there wasn't much emphasis on what I'm saying to you right now. It was just talked about that this is the way it is, and most therapists ended up picking a few different theoretical models to work with and developing their ability to use them as best they could. And for me, it got to a point where I was just totally frustrated with the fact that none of this seemed to produce much of a result. And in the research that was done, The research was inconclusive about exactly what worked and didn't work. And then, you know, through being interested in meditation and starting to study some of these Eastern philosophies, particularly the Advaita philosophies, I started to realize why things were the way they were. And the bottom line, which I wrote a book about because I thought it was significant, was my discovery, for myself as well as in the work that I do with other people, that the person and the personality that is considered to be who people are, that you're working with to do psychotherapy, to change behavior, to help them to mature and to help them to be more effective in living their lives, that this personality actually doesn't exist. When this was something that I saw very clearly, it was actually a shock. It was actually a shock. Because if that's the truth, then all of these models that are trying to interpret human behavior and all of these approaches to work with people to change behavior and fix problems are a waste of time, because you're dealing with a ghost. Actually, in Buddhism, they call people hungry ghosts. Hungry ghosts. Because in that philosophy, they understand that who people think they are is not real. You are not a personality. A personality is a psychological construct. The name you were given when you were a child could have been any name. The experiences that you had from childhood on that developed what's called your personality, formed your personality, had you behave in certain patterns of behavior, right? Had your brain be organized in a certain way. None of that was evidence for there being an actual person. There is no actual person. This, in my opinion, is maybe one of the most important things for any human being to realize. And when I saw it clearly, and when I started to realize that there were thousands of years of teachings that emphasized this truth, and then went on to talk about how to deal with the fact that there is no actual person. You could call it ego, if you want to call it ego, if you want to get into using a Freudian term. But meditation was part of the work that you could do to undo the trance state that most people are living their life in which they believe that they're a person, and help them wake up and realize their true nature. And their true nature is what was there before the personality was learned. And their true nature is awareness itself. But people are living in this state of personality, living in this limited belief system. After I realized this, I really started to spend a tremendous amount of my time practicing meditation, going to intensive retreats, to really undo this mess in my own experience and be able to see clearly here what was really going on and what was true. Because I had experienced, and most therapists won't admit to this, but the reality was I had experienced that most of the people that I had in treatment to do psychotherapy with were suffering from the same basic things I was. In terms of experiencing anxiety, experiencing confusion, having trouble with relationships, having trouble with dealing with my parents as I got older, having trouble parenting my children as I had children, having trouble with my relationships with my wives. And yes, wives, plural, which is evidence of the unworkability of functioning in relationship. And so for me, it wasn't just about trying to be more effective in working with my clients, it was about using what this had to offer to have my own life work. And when I did use it, it did work. And I really became free from continuing to operate in ways that were dysfunctional and did not work. And I could begin to offer that to my clients and help people to learn how to meditate. And because of that, I wrote a book. It's been a couple of years ago since I wrote this book called Dying to Live. And I called it Dying to Live because if you realize the truth about yourself, which is that you're not the personality, even though you identify with being a personality, then to go through a process in which you let go of that identity, which is kind of a death of the personality, and then when that dies, what's there, which has been behind it all along, is the reality of what you are, your true nature, awareness itself. And when you discover that, you discover a natural ability to be happy. You discover a natural ability to operate in a much more realistic way in life. And what can happen as far as changing negative behaviors and addictive behaviors is no longer limited. Anything can happen. All possibilities are open. And I've seen a dramatic, in my own life, I have mentioned this here before, I can look back not that long ago in my own life and remember a time when, compared to who I am today, I was literally crazy. You wouldn't know it if you knew me then, right? Because the word, when I say crazy, I mean normal. You wouldn't know it if you knew me then, because when I say crazy, I'm saying that most people are crazy. Most people are running around chasing their own tail. Most people are neurotic as hell. Most people are addicted to one thing or another. Most people's relationships don't work very well. Most people don't know how to get on with life and have it work. And as time passes and the inevitable things occur in their life, they just become traumatized and resigned. And then you can go over to Lima Estates and see the results of that, right? You know, a lot of people just staring at the wall all day waiting for the body to die. That's part of the problem here, is that the establishment, even now, the majority of the conventional establishment of psychotherapists and psychiatrists are in denial. Just like the scientists are in denial about quantum physics. They still believe in the material explanation for reality. You can't, and you know, these are people who were trained in all this, so it's scary for them to give up, you know, because they're basically going to have to admit, I don't know what I'm doing, right? So no, you don't see that. Most of the conventional therapists still do it the old way, you know, and they maintain the idea that people are just very difficult to change, and so you can't expect to produce significant results with people. That's what they say to one another. And they all hide the truth about themselves personally, you know, which is they're as crazy or crazier than their clients. And I'm not kidding when I say that. I've been in this business for 50 years. I've met hundreds of professional people, psychiatrists and psychologists. I've been in charge of psychology departments and psychiatric departments. And I have to admit, I can't remember meeting anybody that wasn't crazy. I have met psychologists that were actually working with people doing therapy who were psychotic, who needed to be committed to an institution, right? So that's what we got, you know. And so I have found, and when I started to see this and I started to use this with the people I was working with in prison, I was producing miracles. I was producing miracles. People who that I started working with, a regular psychologist wouldn't even attempt to work with them. And I had those very same people become free of drug use. I had one guy create a NA chapter in the prison and stay clean from then all the way until today. And now he's gone to graduate school and he's going into the prisons treating inmates with addiction problems. These things aren't supposed to happen. Right? So that's one of the reasons I'm here today. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book. That's one of the reasons I teach this stuff. And one of the things that I thought about this was, how can I be the only person that sees this? You know, I mean, it's a big world here. And last week I actually ran into another psychologist that not only saw this, but had been to India, studied meditation with several of the masters, and studied these teachings with several of the masters, and came back and wrote a book in the 1980s called Quantum Psychology that is exactly what I'm talking about, and has been practicing it ever since. It's never become popular, right, because It's not a program you can see, and this is why it's never become popular. It's not a program you can go to a graduate school program and get trained in, right, and get your PhD approved by the APA, American Psychological Association. And the reason why is because this is not an approach to human behavior and treatment that you can just learn about it and then apply the method. This isn't like that. You have to have gone through the experience yourself. You have to talk about it in another way. You have to go through the process of becoming enlightened before you can use this with other people. And that's one of the reasons why when I talk about enlightenment in here, which I do for those of you who are new, I don't consider enlightenment to be some very unusual, weird thing. I consider enlightenment to be something that is available to any human being that's willing to start to pay attention to the truth of who they are, to start to practice meditation, start to learn about the nature of your own mind, and start to realize what's possible for you in your life in terms of waking up and discovering that what you are is not your personality, and that what's possible for you is the same thing that has been possible for people in the past that were considered enlightened beings. This whole enlightenment thing has got to come to an end. It's understandable that in India back in the day, when in China and India and Japan, the whole guru thing and people living in caves and making this special and, you know, only certain people could be enlightened and so forth. You know, those days are over. Those days are over. And that's why when you come to this class, you know, I don't have any problem talking about these things with you and inviting you to learn about it and take on the possibility of being a fully realized human being, coming out of the misery, coming out of the neurosis, coming out of the psychological conditions, to experience your ability to function at a different level in the world. So when the things happen, which they will, like the stuff that's going on right now in my family, you can be steady about it. You can keep your feet on the ground. You don't have to freak out. You don't have to get crazy and start blaming yourself or start reacting and being angry with other people. You can see things with a clear way that allows you to maintain a steady way of behaving and allows you to come from a place in your heart that is clear, effective, and caring and loving and kind, instead of getting into a lot of the insane places that people get in their heads. You have to understand something about medication. Medication controls, in an artificial way, controls the chemistry in the body and controls the negative experiences of depression and anxiety and so forth, right? But it's manipulating chemistry, right? It doesn't ever deal with the cause of the anxiety, right? In this work that I'm speaking of here, we get to the cause. We get to why people are anxious and why people are depressed, and we talk about how you can use meditation and how you can learn things to come out of that and experience yourself a different way. But what you're saying is true. The first thing, and these guys will tell you, these two guys will tell you because they've been coming, and Helen's been coming to the class for a while, that meditation requires that you make an absolute commitment to go through the process of learning how to do it and do it consistently. Otherwise, it's not going to work. If you do that over time, after a certain period of time, you begin to actually see that it is working. And then you're interested in it because you're experiencing a different quality of life and you're experiencing yourself functioning better. But in terms of what you're saying, you know, I have grandkids. My grandson is in his early 20s, you know, and I have tried to talk to him about it. I've given him my book to read. I have a 17-year-old granddaughter, same thing, right? But they're so far out in another place in their life in terms of being in that transitional time in their life. You know, and then the other thing, what I say to people like yourself is, you learn it, you practice it, and then you demonstrate the difference it makes in relationship to the people around you, right? And then they get interested. When I'm around my grandkids, they're interested and they want to talk to me about meditation and so forth because they can see how I am different than other people. That's the sales, that'll sell it, like that. Well, one of the major ways that I'm different from other people with them, as well as animals and strangers and everybody else, right, is that I experience other people to be me. I have a natural expression of kindness, a natural expression of compassion. You know, when I'm around my grandkids, they feel important around me. You know what I mean? I don't take them for granted. They matter. I listen to them. I want them to know that I love them. I make sure I express that to them and so forth. You know, that's a different way of relating to kids than most adults do. And so they are attracted to that. That's magnetic to them, you know. That's what they want the most. And so when you make that available, I remember when I was a kid in high school, and I had a very difficult childhood. But when I was a kid in high school, there was one guy who was a history teacher, and he used to stand in the hallway between classes, and he would have a mob of kids around him. And I couldn't figure out what the attraction was, and so I went over and I started hanging around, and I felt myself attracted to this guy. And what it was, and I was young then, so I didn't even understand it, but what it was he really cared. He really wanted to know who you were. What's your name? You know, how do you feel? What's going on? You know, what's bothering you? And I ended up going in his class. I wasn't interested in history, but I went in his class just to be around him. And we became, you know, he became a father figure for me. And at one point when we were talking, he said to me, well, you know, when you go to college, and I started laughing because I came from an inner city poor family, and going to college to me was like unreal. That wasn't going to happen, right? But when he said, well, when you go to college, and I started laughing, he said, what are you laughing about? And I said, that's not happening. He took me to the guidance counselor and went and verbally attacked the guidance counselor for not having me on a college you know, path as far as high school was concerned. Brought my parents in, had me psychologically tested, and put me in a federally funded program to pay for my tuition. This is what can happen when you're around an awakened person, you see. So I really encourage you for you to look into this and to pay attention to it and to start to listen to the teachers. There are many current teachers out there that are teaching about these things, and get a hold of my book and read my book. You can get it on Amazon. Right? It's called Dying to Live. And that'll give you a clearer sense of what this is all about here. You can go on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel called DRD Parish 48. There's 195 talks there. So there are things here that you can use and do to really make a significant difference. Right? Okay, see you later.